Hey, everybody. I'm Carlo Cisco. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of Select. Obviously, thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. I'm here with Erika and Eric, who are going to be helping us cover the topic of hospitality in the age of COVID and how we rebuild. So I'll let them sort of introduce themselves, but the very quick line, Erika is a partner at Simple Venue and also across numerous successful hospitality ventures. I think that word is important. So she's got a really unique insight into the industry. And of course, she has a huge concentration in New York, but actually has venues all across the country. And then Eric is the current Brookyln Borough president and also a mayoral candidate for New York, one of the, of course, front-runner mayoral candidates. So very excited to have you both. Thank you for joining us.
And notice that Erika and Eric, we partied at birth. I got to see ending,
Awesome. Well, look, diving in, Erika, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got involved in the hospitality industry?
Sure. First of all, I just wanted to say we're huge fans of Select and the community that it puts our brands in front of. So thank you, Carlo, for having me here today and, everything that you do to have Select be amazing for us. About me, I first moved to New York City when I was 18 as a college student at NYU, and I started working at a bar to make some extra money. And soon enough, I fell in love with the magic of the hospitality industry and just the overall power of being an entrepreneur in a city where it felt like literally anything was possible. Since then, I've been creating brands and building businesses. So it's now about 15 years. My current company, as you mentioned, Simple Venue, owns and operates food and beverage concepts up and down the East Coast. Most notably, I'm hoping most of you guys have heard of us, if not from our own marketing efforts, but from Select, Sushi by Boo, Sushi Suite, Sushi by Bay, Sidebar, Hudson Terrace, and with many, many more openings slated in the near future that were supposed to happen in 2020, but will hopefully happen this year and beyond.
Awesome. I'm very excited as a new South Florida resident for the Pompano Beach location.
Yes, me too. Not as a resident.
That'll be really cool.
Yes, thank you.
So Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and sort of how you found your way into politics?
A long time ago, as a child, I was arrested by police, believe it or not. And my brother and I, we were assaulted by the police officers who arrested us. And as a few years went by, a group of civil rights activists asked me to join the police department because I was part of an organization that fought for reform. And I was reluctant, but I was happy I did because I went inside and started an organization that fought for safety and justice. I believe they go together. The prerequisite to prosperity is public safety. And after serving for 22 years, I was extremely well known because of my advocacy, and I was able to run for state senate, and I was the chair of racing and gaming in the state of New York, and I went on to become the borough president of the borough of Brookyln. But hidden in all of that, I used to give some of the hottest parties, in the beginning of my career. And that's why I understood as the police officers, you don't close down great venues. It attracts people to our city. It's part of our economic base. And, that is where you really get an opportunity to cross-pollinate with other people from other cultures and other backgrounds.
I'm sorry I missed those parties.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the overview. And now that we've got a little more information about both of our panelists, Erika, let's start off with you. Obviously, the past 12 months have been tough for everybody. Tell us what it's been like as a hospitality business owner and particularly one with multiple venues.
Are you going to bleep out any language I use? Or?
No.
Okay, then I'll say.
Free for all.
I mean, we can joke about it, but it was awful. I mean, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, infuriating, all of the above. Just imagine everything you've worked so hard for, made sacrifices for, poured your heart, your soul, all your money into, just taken away from you overnight, and with no answers on when you're going to get it back, if you're going to get it back, and if you do, we have no idea what it was even going to look like. You know, our employees were our extended family. They still are. We had to let go over 250 of them overnight. You know, just watching everybody around you lose their livelihoods and, you know, the means which they provide for their families. It's heartbreaking. You know, and I know hospitality wasn't the only industry affected by this, but we all know it was the most dramatic and the most drastic change overnight. And, you know, I think I can speak for everyone when I say that what made it more infuriating, sadly, was the way it felt like it was handled in New York specifically.
Yeah. I think a lot of people at this point can agree with that. Obviously, there's differences of opinion on the matter, but we'll get into later how you sort of saw that play out across the jurisdictions that you're in, and maybe what could have been done better in New York in light of the situation. So Eric, you know, being from Brookyln yourself, what was it like to see what, you know, New York City went through these past 12 months? You know, of course, at one point being, you know, truly the epicenter of the pandemic here in the U.S.
Yeah, I was always an advocate for the bar and entertainment and restaurant scene. I started an organization here in Brookyln called Bar. It was really an accumulation of all of our nightlife establishments and how we came together just really to make the city a place where things come alive at night. And you know, it's fascinating that in the 5 boroughs of New York City, had a meeting with Con Edison, and they stated out of the 5 boroughs in New York City, after 7 p.m., the electricity use in Brookyln increases drastically because of our entertainment and nightlife. And people wanted to be out and they wanted to really just entertain with other groups. And so I think that Erika touched on something that's crucial. I always use the analogy of sitting on the tarmac waiting for a plane to take off. You just need answers.
Yeah.
You know, people are not expecting miracles. They just want to be able to know, what am I dealing with, and not the uncertainty. Erika and other nightlife and hospitality personnel should not have to read in the paper what is about to happen or what isn't going to happen. And that's what we saw time and time again throughout these last few months. And that was a big problem for our city and state. The uncertainty that was not attached to science. It was attached to almost a whim from day to day.
I think that's a great analogy and a great point. And honestly, obviously much more difficult for the, you know, businesses that are directly in the hospitality industry who are operating the venues. But it was honestly difficult for us to watch as well. And we tried to take basically as a proactive of an approach as we could to sort of getting the word out for venues. I think we even sent out some information around PPP because we know for, you know, people that might not be as business savvy as Erika is, the hospitality owner, that like, that's actually a pretty tough thing to crack and to learn. So just being a resource as best we could. And I really think that analogy is important. Just the lack of communication and support and clarity makes it so difficult, I'm sure, as a business owner to plan and frankly to have those difficult conversations that unfortunately, you know, were needed, especially during the peak of closures. But so Erika, diving back, you know, into your experience with this, your locations are predominantly in Manhattan, but you've also got, you know, Jersey City, Chicago, Miami, maybe even a few other areas. Curious what you saw sort of across the jurisdictions, and did you feel that any handled it better or worse than any others?
I mean, listen, I'm not an expert. Nobody is. I think going into this, no one had any idea what we were dealing with, how long it was going to last, the severity of the situation. There was no right answer. We're not going to go ahead and say that this person did this wrong. It was a very difficult situation, and there was no perfect way to handle it. But I also don't think anyone would be shocked to hear that the Sushi by Boo location we have in Miami at the Versace Mansion, for example, is thriving. And we're about to open a very promising new location, as you are thankfully very excited for, as so are many other people, as we've heard, in Pompano Beach, Florida. While New York, I mean, we're still at only 50%, half of our own locations, and you know we have a big group behind us. Like we have the power to do it, but half of our locations haven't even been open. We don't know if all of them are going to be reopened, and you know, there's just still so many questions. We just don't know. You know, I think for New York specifically, there was a lot of the just a lot of mismanagement. There was too many contradictions. There was a lot of times where it felt like decisions were just being made with no rhyme or reason, and it ended up hurting everybody. You know, it was, we're open, we're not open, we're shut down, we're not shut down. This is the capacity. We're going to change it. It's going to be different on Long Island, which is, you know, only how many miles away. It's just that's what builds up the frustration, and it doesn't make any sense, quite frankly.
I agree. I mean, look, even I was living in the suburbs of New Jersey. Even there, it was a little different. Sort of like we were late to open as well, but we didn't have the sort of reclosure. And also like benefits out in the suburb, businesses out in the suburbs benefit a little bit from having a bit more outdoor space. So they have a little more flexibility. So that indoor, just matters a little bit less because there's more space. But in Manhattan, it's tough when you're only talking about outdoor, and then especially as we moved into the winter. It
was, the closures. Think about how much money everyone spent creating. I mean, literally just creating indoor dining outside.
Yeah.
You're asking businesses, to do these things and jump through hoops that have no resources. They don't have the money coming in, but we're spending it on building the same thing. If half of the friends that I have in the industry said that their outdoor dining was probably more dangerous than their actual indoor dining, and how much he was just thrown into the wind to do it. And then every time it was too windy or it snowed, you had to remove it's just too much.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I remember being like pretty stunned when I saw like Chicago reclose indoor and like people were still booking through Select. I was like, what is this? Were they like honestly like braving winter in Chicago to like eat at restaurants? But I guess what it was the places that made those investments that you're talking about, where it's indoor. It's just not attached to the building.
Yeah, but Chicago at least felt a lot more stable across the board. It didn't feel like New York felt like. Some people, it's not feel like it maybe was. There was just like crazy people just saying like, do this, do that. We're going to change this. We're going to do that. Like you can't, with everything else that you're dealing with, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And just not possible.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I believe one of the untold stories throughout the COVID process was just how committed and dedicated that our nightlife and our hospitality, the industry was, the Hospitality Alliance and other organizations, they wanted to participate. They wanted to know, how do we make sure our diners are safe? How do we keep our employees employed? And how do we feed into this ecosystem? Because New York City has an ecosystem. That restaurant is closed. If you have to lay off those 250 employees, many of them are bus boys and girls, dishwashers, waiters. They are low salary, low skilled employees. It impacts our entire ecosystem. And we need to take all of these things into account as we make these decisions to find out, how do I keep you open, up, and operated? You should not have the state liquor authority coming in, harassing you, the Department of Transportation harassing you, police coming in. Everyone is looking at ways of how do I close you instead of ways of how do I keep you open in a safe way. Yeah,
I think that's a really important point to illustrate. And even for myself, like sort of working from home was an adjustment for me, but I actually really like it. And like, I didn't mind being locked down for a couple months. I think during that period, like we said, no one knew what was going on. We sort of had to do what was safest for everybody. But certainly, like, as more data came in, more learnings came in, this is just me personally. I don't mind being in my house all week and like basically not leaving the house. But on the weekend, but on the weekend, I like to be able to go to a restaurant. That's one of the experiences that I personally really enjoy. And I think a lot of people are in that camp. In addition to the whole economic aspect of it, I think there's actually a psychological aspect to it, where it's really rough to not be able to go out and have that experience that you're so used to having for such a long period of time. And Eric, you already shared some insights on this actually, but and look, we can all look back now and say what would have been good to do or whatever. Hindsight's always 20/20. But curious, sort of like, as you saw the situation develop and in the moment, like, how would you have handled things differently in New York had you been mayor when this hit?
Well, immediately, I would have done something that we don't do enough of. I would have pulled together organizations like yours, owners like Erika, Nightlife, Establishments and Group, the Alliance, get them in the room and say, here's what we're up against. Here are the numbers, here's the data, here are the stats. And we would have mapped out a real plan and a communication network so that we can keep you up to date. Then I would have brought in my DOT, my State Liquor Authority, my NYPD, my Department of Buildings, the entire team, and give them their mission. Hey guys, the mission is to keep the establishments open in a safe way. The mission is not to see how many citations you can write. The mission is not to go in and figure out how am I going to be heavy-handed. How do we ensure that those who are doing the right things are getting the support that they deserve? And then lastly, on my part, I would have had a different front with the governor. We're not going to be fighting and being petty back and forth during a time when the livelihood of individuals were at stake. What Erika stated, that imagine investing everything you have to open your establishment, and then you look up on the screen and see your two executives in the state and the city bickering with each other. You're saying to yourself, what am I missing here? Everything I've put into this business is going down the drain. You guys need to get it together. And I would have sent that signal that, listen, we're going to get through it, New York.
Great. Yeah, definitely couldn't agree more. And it's obvious why you are now in politics and already pretty established from that answer if it wasn't clear prior. So Erika, jumping back to you, obviously, at this point, you're truly a hospitality industry veteran. You've had a lot of success across the industry. What did you see sort of play out as some of the biggest challenges for the hospitality businesses this year? We've already talked about some, but just like, what do you see play out as some of the big challenges? And I'm also curious, what you saw in terms of what some businesses did that was really innovative and interesting and a good way of conquering the benefit. I'll have a personal anecdotal example is there's a restaurant I liked by me in New Jersey in Millburn that basically sought out this outdoor space. And they actually managed to, during the period where it was like 25% indoor and outdoor, they had more capacity than before COVID, which I thought was really cool. And obviously they had to be proactive. There's not a ton of spaces like that, but a lot of places have done interesting things. I've seen igloos and stuff too, but curious what you've seen being such a veteran.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously everyone turned to delivery. It was, amazing to see some of these like super high-end restaurants, Michelin star places suddenly like offer takeout. You gotta flex with it, and you gotta be, you just have to be flexible, and that's what it was amazing to see that. The igloos were great. The outdoor dining was great. We saw a lot of people do like in-home where they were, sending chefs. Like we did a ton of that where we would send a sushi chef to your home and do like a private dining experience where it felt safer and more comfortable. We saw a lot of people do smaller, our concepts, for example, worked for that. Sushi Baby was already an intimate experience, so that kind of allowed us to stay busy where we didn't allow mixed groups at certain points, but so a lot of people cut down and just made it private. We saw people take actual hotel rooms and start doing things in that if they were in that space. I actually saw a lot of business owners actually take on other interests of theirs that had nothing to do with hospitality and suddenly feed them through their networks. Some people were doing, a lot of people needed like talk therapy and just communities to talk to. It's a very hard time. So a lot of people introduced that into their spaces where they were doing virtual events to, host with the community and mix it with, whatever food they were doing as like a virtual dinner and talking. People got flexible because there was no other choice. The ones, if you want to succeed, it's survival of the fittest, always, but especially now.
Yeah.
In terms of struggles, we all know the struggles. It's letting go of your employees. It's not being able to pay rent. It's not being able to pay your bills. It's wondering how you're going to support your family. It's, making sense of all the rules and regulations that were constantly changing and then figuring out how do I adapt my business to actually not only make sense of it, but actually implement it into my business without affecting the already strained business that I'm operating. The cost of PPE for your staff, which, could be anywhere upwards $5 to $10 per person per day, depending what your business is. And I think the worst part of it is just, sadly, I think the biggest struggle is losing belief in what you're doing and, losing the will to go on. which I've seen a lot of people do also, and just make the tough decision. I think that was the hardest struggle, making the decision of, at the end of the day, is it worth it? Is killing myself worth it for this? Like, even before the pandemic, it was difficult. Even before the pandemic, this industry had very small margins, but you know, people were in it because they were passionate. At the end of the day, when you feel like your own system, your own government is beating you up about it, and it's suffocating, you know, at some point you just give up.
Right. No, I get it. And it's, you know, it's sad to see. We've been very fortunate that so many of our partners have, you know, weathered the storm. It seems, at least to this point, certainly a much lower closure rate than we're seeing nationally, because of the tier of venue that we work with, you know, like the Sushi Barbos of the world. But regardless, you know, a really rough thing to go through. And as an entrepreneur, I can relate. I can, you know, like it certainly impacted our business, but not as significantly. And we felt very fortunate to be in that position to sort of like be able to innovate and adapt and ultimately now come out of it stronger. But, you know, it takes time. And obviously for the many venues and restaurants that we work with, it takes a little more time, unfortunately. And hopefully, and the big thing is hopefully the right support is there to make sure that everybody comes out of it. Because at the end of the day, like Eric said at the beginning, I think restaurants and bars are a huge part of what attracts people to our cities, why people want to be in them, why people want to visit. And I'm sure that those closures had a decent impact. That's actually a really good segue into Eric's next question that was unplanned, but like had a pretty big impact on what we saw in New York in general, which a lot of people left, some temporary, some permanent, a lot of people left. So obviously, you know, New York, the last 12 months, it's been rough. You know, in the hospitality industry, but it's been rough across the board. You know, Eric, what are you sort of planning to do to revive the city and get it back up to what we all know it can be, which is this incredible place where so many great minds and people are coming together, achieving incredible things, and hopefully having the opportunity to enjoy themselves as well?
Well, there's several things we must do. And I just always want to lean into that. Our city is a financial ecosystem, and you can't impact one part of that ecosystem without it impacting others. Yeah. So we have to get the city up and running again. We have to stick our toes back into the water. If it starts off as 3 days a week, I need my accountant back inside his office space so he could go down to the restaurant, and we can start getting business travelers here. Over 70% of our hotel occupancy is based on business travelers. We want them to go to the restaurant. We want them to go to the theater. We want to encourage tourism, a multi-billion-dollar industry that if we lose that tourism, we will impact our entire city and much of our economic base. And so COVID must get under control with clear regulations coming from the city and federal government, so we won't have frivolous lawsuits if someone contracts COVID inside an office space. Once we do that, then we have to do something that's often overlooked. The economic stimulus of this city is safety. We can't continue to see an increase in gun violence in our city. No one is going to come to New York if you have a problem with gun violence in the city, and we're seeing too much of it now. I am going to reinstitute the anti-plainclothes unit, and we're going to do precision policing to go after those who are creating crimes, particularly gun violence. I'm going to turn it into a gun violence unit. We're going to focus on too many illegal guns on our street. There are too many people involved in gang behavior that are participating in these violent acts we see. It hurts tourism. No one is coming to a city that's out of control. You know, I remember what the city was like, that no one wanted to visit this city. We're not going back to that. And so it's imperative that we get violence under control. The prerequisite to prosperity is public safety. And then thirdly, we need to attract people here. Our city is too expensive, too bureaucratic, and too difficult to do business in. This should be the place of life sciences, biotech, of self-driving cars, drone development, technology. We should lift up what Google is doing in Chelsea and what Facebook did by a long-term lease down in Hudson Yard. We need to be an attractive place, and where tech startups and new startups are supposed to happen. And that is my goal, to say that this city is open for business again, And when you used to cross the George Washington Bridge, you see that sign that says, "Welcome to the Empire State." Well, let's turn this back to a place where we make empires. And that's the goal of the next mayor.
Love it. Yeah, I think you covered a lot of incredibly important points there. And it's always been interesting for me to see too, like New York is usually one of our top travel destinations, even though it's our largest market for members, which sort of indicates that there's an outsized proportion of people, all across the country and even across the world that of course travel to New York. And that element of it is, pretty big when you're talking about how that sort of trickles into the restaurants, the bars, all of that, because of course, if people are traveling, they're out there having experiences, they're out there having meetings, et cetera. And then tying that, I thought, to the business concept was really interesting, because you got to be open to do business if you're going to have the business travelers, and knowing the 70% stat is important too. And, that's a real thing, because, like right now with remote work and all of that, like the sort of business epicenters are potentially going to be disrupted, but they won't be if the leadership has that sort of mentality. That's
there's another point that's very important. We have to stop demonizing affluent New Yorkers. 65,000 New Yorkers out of the 8 million plus New Yorkers, 65,000 pay 51% of our income tax. They're only 2% of our income tax filers. And there's a disconnect from the rhetoric when people say, I don't care if affluent New Yorkers leave or not. No, I want you to stay. I want you to be here. I want you to go to Broadway. I want you to donate into my nonprofits. I want you to visit my restaurants. So we have to be very careful to send this signal that we're not part of the same ecosystem. That affluent New Yorker, that is how I keep my teachers in my school. That is how I keep my firefighters putting out fires and my EMS going to emergency. If we don't stop this demonizing of affluent New Yorkers as though we don't need them here in our city, we're going to lose what is one of our jewels, and that people are willing to stay here, be a part of our economy, and make sure that we stabilize this city.
Absolutely. Great. So shifting back to Erika for a second. And by the way, guys, I'm seeing a couple questions come in to ask a question. Now's a good time to start to put questions in there if you have them, because we're getting towards the end of our questions, and then we'll get to as many of yours as we can for everyone who's tuned in. So Erika, coming back to, what government could have done differently, like what could have been done differently or better sort of at every level of government, city, state, federal. What do you think government could have done to help business owners like you more and help you weather the storm?
Sure. I mean, I don't think we need to talk about just the pandemic. I think it's just in general, because I think everyone's focused on the pandemic, but there was issues, especially in this industry, even before the pandemic. So I think we can address everything in general. Yeah. Small businesses need support, right? There needs to be, in my opinion, there needs to be a fundamental shift in the general relationship between small businesses and government, where it feels more like a partnership, and that all parties are actually on the same page and they want to see small businesses succeed. Eric mentioned many things where, they're attacking small businesses with all these ridiculous things. For us, it's, sometimes I feel like small businesses feel like we're being treated as ATM machines for the city. The city collects right now on average, I believe, 30 million a year in fines from small businesses. 30 million. That's with ridiculous fines from SLA, DOB, all these ridiculous things. And of course, we need to maintain rules and regulations and keep our customers safe, of course. But I know I'm not the only victim that has been a victim of an inspection that was fine one day, and then 6 months later, we get an inspection, and all of a sudden, all the things that passed last 3 times, all of a sudden, we get fined thousands of dollars for, and we're getting penalized for things that were never a problem before. So, it's a broken system. Carlo, you mentioned earlier, it's difficult for, people to navigate the PPP and all this. Sometimes it feels like it's made to be difficult. There's so many small businesses, there's so many people that they just want to run their businesses. They just want to provide jobs for people. They want to provide incomes for their family. And it just feels like it's always like this this maze that you have to get through, and you have to get through all this paperwork. Like, why does it need to be that difficult? Why do you need so many different agencies contacting you? Why do you need mail getting lost so you didn't see this reference and now you have a fine, a late fee on top of it? It's just these small businesses, you can't afford that, and what happens when the small businesses go away? Then what? And so it just feels like a broken system currently for at least the hospitality industry.
It's not a feeling.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank you.
Three pieces. When you go to my website, I have a 100 plus steps forward for New York City, and I really encourage people to look at it because it came out of meeting with small businesses, and three things that came out of that I'm proposing. Number one, what you just said, Erika. Why can't we have a My City card, which I'm going to create, with all of your information, and you can go to one agency, one single platform, and everything you need to do to register for your business, all the information you need could be right there, and you don't have to go from agency to agency to agency. One place navigates, draw down all that information, do all of the filing, make sure we're dealing with one platform, and you know what you need, what documents you have to prepare online through an app. Let's really streamline the process. Second, we're proposing, and I'm going to implement, having my Chamber of Commerce do all your backroom work that you need. If you are a baker, I want you just to bake. I don't want you to have to worry about compliance. I don't want you to worry about payroll. I don't want you to worry about anything else but baking your products. And we need to give you the backroom support that allows a business to run without having to worry about all of those minor things that it takes. You spend so much hour as a business person having to deal with all of the documentations coming from the city and filing. If one chooses to do that, it's fine, but I want to give them the option to know that here, the chamber will handle that for you. The third thing, which is most important for me, I think fines should be placed in a 3-level system. I like to call it red, yellow, and green. When we walk into your business, if you have some form of violation and is non-life threatening, non-dangerous to people, that should be a green level where you could give 30 days to improve it. Just letting you know you need to rectify the situation, and in 30 days, give you an opportunity to do so. If it's something that should be corrected with a reasonable amount of time, you get 2 weeks to do it. If it's life-threatening, you have 24 hours to do it. So before we issue a citation, we should be there to help the business and get past. Now, those who want to ignore those safety measures, then it's all right to say, listen, you're going to be fined for this because you didn't take it. But that should not be our first plan of action to fine you. The plan of action is, how do I keep you in business? Because that $2,000 fine could destroy a business. And when you get continuous fines like that, it only hurts the business staying open.
I would love to see all that happen. I mean, in reality, it doesn't seem, it's a pretty simple technology that can loop all of those different, departments together and put all that into one place. So we're not constantly navigating, how many different departments and how many different fines and deadlines. We have to set our own calendars. We have enough to worry about for running our business on top of the compliance issue.
Yeah, I can't even imagine for a hospitality business, because even just the employee side, we tried it for a little bit on our own and then outsourced it. I really feel like that's the only way to do it. It's so complicated. It can be so time consuming. And then if you make any sort of small mistake, boom, a couple grand there, boom. Yeah. Like right away, small mistake, not big gap in time, lots of money, like you guys are saying. And that's where a partnership would be really different. The second part of my answer, and I'm glad Eric already touched on it. It's a critical piece is safety, because businesses need people and people need safety. And sadly, so many people don't feel like the city is a safe place to be right now. At this point, we've had hundreds of thousands of people leave permanently. A lot of people undecided, honestly. And on top of that, at least I believe the stat is at least 1 million commuters that have stopped commuting, and now big businesses threatening to leave. So, at the end of the day, even if we do see ourselves getting to 100%, hopefully that day comes sooner than later. But when it happens, are we even going to have enough people to fill those businesses? Because 100% is great if we have an empty city. Then what?
Well said. And you can see the evidence of the number of people who have departed the city. Probably one of the only booming businesses we're having in the city are those who are part of moving industries. And we need to stop it and attract people here. And when you talk to those New Yorkers who are fleeing, you hear over and over again, I see a homeless crisis that's out of control. I'm afraid to ride the subway because someone may push me on the tracks or assault me. And I'm afraid to walk my streets. We cannot lose our quality of life. If we do so, we're going to return to the days of the 70s where people fled from New York instead of fled to New York.
Definitely. So we got to touch on this a little bit, but Eric, same sort of question for you. What do you think could have been done differently at the city, state, federal level? And then maybe add to that, why do you think you're better positioned to help New York recover from this now and tackle the unique challenges that it has now than perhaps some of your competitors?
Well, I think that many people woke up and decided that, hey, I would like to run for mayor. I understand the real impact of this city. I know this city. I know it well. And from being a kid that was a dishwasher in a restaurant, as a young man who went to school at night, paying his way through, a person that had terrible outcomes with police misconduct, but also a person that understands the power of public safety and being a unifier, bringing people together in this city. And knowing it is to be on the verge of homelessness. They used to call my siblings and I, we were the glad bag children. We carried a garbage bag full of clothing to school every day because we thought the marshals were going to throw us out. And so going through a lot, understands that New Yorkers are going through a lot. And the next mayor must be someone who has gone through a lot so he can help people who are going through a lot. And this city needs a real leader that knows how to execute. And think about this city for a moment. New York City is one of the few places where a plane can fly into a building like the Trade Center or land on the Hudson. Or you can have mass protests like the Black Lives Matter March or anarchists that's trying to destroy and burn down our city. The uncertainty of a mayor really must be a person who can adapt immediately and deploy the right resources to protect our city. I'm the only one that has done that for 22 years. Every day I walked into that precinct, I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I had to respond and had to make sure that New Yorkers remain safe and make sure that nothing took away the opportunities for New Yorkers to grow. My law enforcement, my technology skill, my ability as a state lawmaker, and now the borough president of the largest borough in the city of New York, this is the right time for my style of leadership, and no one else that's running can put that leadership to the test like I could.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, even just personally, first moving to the city, whatever it was, about 12 years ago, I'm from a small town in Connecticut. So my family was all worried about safety. And New York at that point was in a really good place. I was like, no, you don't understand. It's actually maybe one of the safest places in the world. Like, they're really on top of everything here. There's people everywhere. So no one can really get away with anything. Everything's super safe. And when you take that away in a major city, then that becomes a major problem. Because it affects everything else. Well, guys, that wraps my questions. Thank you both so much for going through all of those. Now I can see we've got a few questions from the audience. We've got a few in questions, one in comments. And Eric, I don't know if you noticed, but a couple of people did give Sushi by Boo props throughout. And I will throw it out there. One of my absolute favorite select places, and particularly Versace Mansion location, is really cool. If you happen to be in Miami, it's just a cool experience to have some of the best sushi of your life in the Versace Mansion. Really cool. Okay, so let's dive into the audience questions. First one is for Erika. At what point did you realize this wasn't going to be short term? And what were your next sort of ideals to try to support your businesses and your employees?
So when we first shut down, I believe it was March 15th or March 16th, just because it was right before St. Patrick's Day, and we were all excited. Our sports bars were going to be busy. And at first, we literally told our staff, sit tight. We think it'll be 2 to 3 weeks. We really thought a month, but we wanted to keep people kind of calm and under control. I think 2 weeks, 3 weeks, by early April, we just, you watch the news, you saw what was happening. We knew it was not. By June, there were several employees that were asking me, my lease is up this summer. Should I keep it or should I go? And I was like, honestly, go. It's just not going to happen. So at that point, we were honest. We did what we could. We, of course, stayed open for delivery at every venue we could. We employed as many people as we could. We gave out as many hours as we could physically afford. We obviously didn't profit anything, but just to keep people on payroll and keep people being able to pay their bills. At that time, the unemployment, the website wasn't working and people couldn't get unemployment checks. We we gave money to our staff that needed it. So it was pretty quick. I would say within the month, we knew that this was going to be a long haul.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like that's a similar timeline for most people, to be honest. Yeah. The first few weeks, you don't know exactly what's going on. But
it'll be a couple of weeks. We'll be back. We'll be back.
Yeah, I think we all have those wishful thoughts, and then it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
No, we tried to stay positive, but then you had to be realistic.
Yeah, very switched fast. Okay, so the next one is for Eric, and it touches on a specific incident that's kind of interesting. So this is someone who owns an apartment in Long Island City, about a block away from where Amazon would have moved their second headquarters back when they were looking at New York for that. Had the deal gone through. He's curious what your take is on that. Now that we've seen COVID, do we think that Amazon move would have been beneficial? How do you think politicians handled that whole situation?
Well, first of all, I blame Amazon because I told them to come to Brooklyn, go into Queens. We sent them letters. I put together a good committee. We had a great presentation. We had space at the Brookyln Navy Yard, as well as the place in the Brookyln Marine Terminal. We could have had a great relationship, and we would have made sure that the residents had a voice and allowed the members who live close to the nitrogen development in the Navy Yard to get the jobs that was actually, they were coming here with Amazon. And so I think the mayor and the governor made a big mistake and misjudged on the ground. We did not allow the residents of Queensbridge to share their thoughts. We allowed those who are politically and social media savvy to hijack the conversation. The conversation should have included those everyday residents in Queensbridge who wanted a real MOU, who was looking forward to employment, job training, and some of the deals that could have been made to ensure that everyone benefited from Amazon. Now, Amazon must pay their employees well. They must make sure employees are able to get real health care. We don't want exploitation of employees, but we can fight and get those things without losing the thousands of jobs that would have come with Amazon.
Yeah, I think it was about 50,000 or something like that, at least from reading about it in the tech space. Yeah, and look, that's in my opinion, right perspective to have, right? Make sure that everybody benefits from it, include everyone in the conversation. That way nobody's left out or left behind. And at the end of the day, if negotiated correctly, it's obviously a beneficial thing for an area to have that many jobs and that prominent of a company come in. So next one, also for Eric, it's what data was available to you as Brookyln Borough president? How much did you collaborate with the mayor and his staff to help New Yorkers get through the pandemic?
Yeah, great question. Here's what I push for. My background is in tech. I used to be a computer programmer. I program on COBOL, Fortran, and assembly. I know that's hieroglyphics now, but that's how you use mainframe. Back in those days, program mainframes. When I entered the police department, I was part of a small team of police officers who created the first version of real-time data usage to fight crimes. This was a different city, 2,000 homicides a year. That program later turned into another version called ComStat that really was the driving force to bring down crime in the city. Why do I point that out? Our city must move to a real-time system. And so what I shared with the mayor and governor, that we should be using GIS mapping and heat maps to tell us in real time where our testing is taking place. Where do we need to test? Where are the cluster areas? We would have had a better handle on the COVID in the beginning if we would have did proper testing and identified the hotspots. Then we should have used telemedicine. Many people went to the hospital and were exposed at the hospital or exposed people in the hospital. If we would have used telemedicine where people would have been able to look at their doctors on their devices, we could have told them what to do from a home place instead of having them being exposed or exposing people. I was able to convince Brookyln Hospital to do so, and eventually Health and Hospital, our largest public hospital system, did the same thing. Now let's look at the vaccination. Think about this for a moment. You go in for a vaccination and you're filling out a form. Why not have a handheld device where you can enter the data and information, the zip code of the people when they're vaccinated, upload it to a database, and in real time see if we're reaching herd immunity based on the zip codes and based on the data of the people? We should not be using 20th century methods in the 21st century. That's an antiquated method. And I tried the darnest to get the mayor and the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. We already built out the prototype for them. We said, this is how easy it could be done. They distributed 900,000 vaccines and said, oops, we didn't do the whole city. When we should have done that in real time so we could correct our course before we distribute almost 1 million vaccines. You can't run cities anymore the way we run cities in America. It is time to understand that technology is our friend and it allows us to run smarter cities so we can start solving 21st century problems and crises.
Yep, definitely agreed. Cool. And we just had another question that came in that's specific to one of your competitors, Eric. so answer this however you like. But it says Andrew Yang wants to institute universal basic income that will deliver funds to New Yorkers, and views that as his main policy offering. This person is questioning how viable that actually is, and is asking, is there a better way to execute on the same objective?
I love that question. And, when I questioned Andrew Yang and he calls it UBI, I says UBI. When I questioned it, people said, well, why you are trying to attack him? That is not what I'm doing. New Yorkers have gone through a lot. And I'm not going to allow people to give New Yorkers false hope. We can't institute a universal base income in New York. That's a federal thing. Because here's what happens. If you are a low-income New Yorker, and if I give you $250 a year or a month or whatever, you are now going to lose the benefits that the federal government was giving you. So you're going to lose money to get money. And we can't do it on a city level. So here's what I say we do. We have something called earned income tax credit, where the city only contributes a small dollar amount to those earned income tax credit. It's a federal program. We match it. And if we have a larger amount that we give to low income New Yorkers, it won't take away the benefits that they're already receiving because the federal government already approves it. And so I call that a family of four, we give them $4,000 a year, give them $250 a month so that it can be spread out for the entire year. And this way, they're able to have a real benefit within the federal guidelines that is a program that already exists. So Andrew is not telling us how he's going to pay for his program. He started with $2,000. Then he went down to saying 250 to 500,000 people. Then he said he's going to use borough bucks. What's next? Monopoly money? Come on. we deserve better from government, not to give false promises. And I want to be honest and forthright on what we can do for our New Yorkers instead of giving them false promises. UBI can't work on a city level the way he's assuming or stating that he could. And he has yet to explain how he's going to pay for it.
Great. Well, that was all the audience questions that we have for now. Thank you guys both so much for joining us. I thought that was really insightful, really fun. It seems like the audience enjoyed it too. We saw a good amount of commentary and people talking. I do want to highlight, as we said on the last newsletter update, Erika very graciously donated a dinner for two to Sushi by Boo in New York. So one of you will be winning that as a thank you.
Not you, Eric.
So one of you will be winning that as a thank you for attending and tuning in. And I saw a couple of people mention joining late during, no problem. Shortly after we conclude, this recording is going to be live. Simply contact the member concierge. They'll direct you to the link so you can access it anytime. If you want to re-access. So thank you both again so much. I enjoyed it. I think the audience enjoyed it. So hopefully you guys did too.
Yes, thank you. Just one correction. It's $3,000 a year in my program. I want to make sure.
Got to make sure it's precise.
All right. Thank you.
So
Take care. Good to meet you, Erika.
Thank you so much.